As the stars faded into the background and the earth loomed large before her, Zara's heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Her mission was clear, yet impossibly complex. Establish contact and assess the viability of human-alien reproduction. The importance of this mission could not be overstated. Her planet, Xylon, was facing a severe genetic bottleneck, and new genetic material was desperately needed to diversify their gene pool. Zara's sleek spacecraft touched down discreetly in a densely wooded area near a small, bustling human town, her arrival undetected by the local population. The advanced cloaking technology of her ship made it invisible to the naked eye, a necessity to ensure the initial observational phase of her mission remained clandestine. For days, Zara observed the humans from a distance. She learned their patterns, their social structures, and their bewildering array of emotions and reactions. Her training had prepared her for this, yet the complexity of human behavior was daunting. The task of finding a suitable mate among them seemed more daunting by the day, especially given her people's warnings about the unpredictable nature of these wild Earthlings. One evening, while cloaked and observing a local gathering from the edge of the forest, she spotted him. Among the boisterous crowd, he stood out, not just for his striking features and strong physique, but for his gentle demeanor and the way others seemed to naturally gravitate towards him. His name, she learned, was Jake. Days turned into weeks as Zara continued to watch Jake from the shadows, learning his routines and the subtleties of his interactions. It was during one of these observations that she accidentally stepped on a dry twig, the sharp crack breaking the night silence like a gunshot. Jake's head whipped around towards the sound. His eyes, sharp and penetrating, seemed to look right through her cloaked figure. Heart pounding, Zara remained motionless, barely daring to breathe. "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice calm but authoritative. When no answer came, he took a few cautious steps towards where Zara stood hidden. Panicking, Zara activated her emergency teleportation device, a bright flash enveloping her as she was whisked back to the safety of her ship. Breathing hard, she slumped against the wall. That had been too close. Over the next few days, Zara wrestled with her fears. Every bit of her training had emphasized caution, the danger of exposure. Yet something about Jake drew her in, a pull she found increasingly difficult to resist. Finally deciding she could observe no longer from the shadows, Zara prepared for the most dangerous part of her mission, direct contact. Disguising herself with her molecular alteration belt, she transformed her appearance to blend in with the humans. She chose a simple, unassuming form, a young woman with brown hair and eyes, someone who would not draw undue attention. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as she approached the place where she had first seen Jake, the local park. He was there, as she had hoped, sitting on a bench under an old oak tree, a book in his hand. Taking a deep breath, Zara walked up to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Jake looked up, his smile warm and inviting. "Not at all," he said, moving his bag off the bench. "Please, have a seat." As she sat down, her senses were overwhelmed by his presence so close to her. This was it. She was finally face to face with a human, and not just any human, but the one she had been observing for weeks. Now, she just needed to find out if the wild tales of Earthlings were true, or if perhaps, just perhaps, there could be a connection, an understanding deeper than any she had experienced before. And with that thought, their conversation began. As Zara settled into the conversation, the world around her seemed to melt away, leaving only her and Jake under the sprawling branches of the oak tree. Every word Jake spoke intrigued her further, revealing layers of complexity and kindness she hadn't anticipated in a human. The initial awkwardness soon gave way to a comfortable rhythm, their dialogue weaving through mundane topics to more profound philosophical questions. Jake's interest in the stars surprised Zara. He spoke of constellations and his fascination with the possibility of life beyond Earth, his eyes alight with wonder. This shared interest provided Zara with a seamless opportunity to probe deeper, to understand not just Jake but human aspirations and fears about the unknown. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Jake suggested a walk. Zara agreed, eager to continue their interaction in a more dynamic setting. As they walked, the proximity allowed her to observe him more closely. The subtle expressions that crossed his face, the thoughtful furrow in his brow when he was deep in thought, and the genuine smile that seemed to light up his features when he laughed. During their stroll, they passed by a small, secluded pond, its surface reflecting the fading light. Jake paused, looking out over the water. "Do you ever feel," he began, turning to her with a curious expression, "like there's so much out there, just beyond reach, waiting to be discovered?" Zara felt a jolt of connection. "All the time," she replied earnestly, her response more truthful than she'd intended. Her heart raced as she realized she'd said too much. Jake looked at her, a mix of surprise and delight in his expression. "It's rare to find someone who gets it," he said. "Most people I know are firmly grounded in the here and now." They continued their walk, discussing dreams in distant galaxies, each step bringing them physically closer and knitting their nascent bond tighter. Zara was acutely aware of the energy between them, a magnetic pull that seemed to defy the simple laws of human attraction she had studied. As night enveloped the park, Jake stopped and turned to her. "I don't want this to end," he admitted, his voice low. "Would you like to grab some coffee? There's a little place nearby that stays open late." The invitation was tempting, a chance to further her mission and deepen the connection. Yet part of her hesitated, wary of the escalating personal involvement. Her mission was to assess, not to form attachments, but she found herself nodding before she could weigh the consequences. The cafe was quaint, with soft music filling the air and dim lighting that provided a sense of intimacy. They chose a secluded corner booth, continuing their conversation over steaming cups of coffee. Here, away from the natural beauty of the park, surrounded by the murmur of other late-night patrons, their discussion took a deeper dive into personal territories, fears, hopes, and dreams. Jake's openness about his life, his vulnerabilities and his aspirations, made Zara reassess her initial impression of Earthlings as wild and unpredictable. Here was a man who embodied sensitivity and complexity, traits valued on Xylon but rarely expected on Earth. As the night drew on, Zara realized she was no longer just gathering information. She was sharing parts of herself she hadn't shared with anyone before, human or Xylonian. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Finally, as they parted ways in the early hours, Jake's hand brushed hers, sending a shockwave of energy through her. "I hope I see you again soon," he said, his voice earnest. Zara watched him walk away, her mind racing with conflicting emotions and the weight of her mission. She needed to report back, to analyze the data. But as she made her way back to her ship, a part of her wondered whether she was already too involved, too drawn to this Earthling who saw the stars the way she did. Under the cover of night, Zara returned to her ship, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. The data she'd collected through her interactions with Jake provided invaluable insights, but her personal feelings were clouding her judgment, an unexpected complication in her mission. Alone in the quiet of her spacecraft, she replayed their conversations, analyzing not just his words, but the feelings they stirred within her. The next few days were a delicate balance of mission duties and deep introspection. She monitored Earth's communications networks, gathered environmental samples, and ran simulations based on the genetic data she had discreetly collected from various sources. Yet, her thoughts incessantly drifted back to Jake, to his insightful eyes and the resonance of his laughter. Compelled by a mix of duty and desire, Zara decided to meet Jake again. She needed to understand if her attraction was merely physiological, spurred by her biological imperative to find a suitable mate, or if something deeper, more inexplicably personal, was at play. Their second meeting was at the same park, this time under the guise of mutual interest in a local astronomical event, a meteor shower predicted to be visible that evening. As they set up a small telescope Jake had brought, the ease between them was undeniable. The night sky, with its vast expanse of stars, served as a perfect backdrop to their deepening connection. As they watched the streaks of light dash across the sky, Jake shared stories of his childhood, of nights spent camping in the wilderness with his father, looking up at the stars and dreaming of other worlds. Zara listened, fascinated not only by his stories but by the emotion behind them. She shared tales of her own, carefully fabricated yet imbued with enough personal truth to feel genuine. The conversation inevitably veered towards the possibility of life beyond Earth. Jake was thoughtful, his gaze fixed on the heavens. "Do you think we're ready, as a species, to meet others out there?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mix of hope and concern. Zara paused, considering her next words carefully. "I think," she started, choosing her words to reflect both her personal and professional assessments, "that readiness isn't about achieving some level of technology or wisdom. It's about openness, the ability to see beyond ourselves and our world, to embrace the unknown with courage and curiosity." Jake nodded, his expression reflective. "I hope I'd be ready, to meet someone from another world." The moment hung between them, charged with implications and possibilities. Zara felt a surge of honesty, a desire to reveal her true self to Jake. Yet the protocols of her mission restrained her. The risk of exposure was too great, not just for her but for her entire species. As the night drew to a close, they packed up the telescope, their physical closeness mirroring the emotional closeness that had blossomed between them. Jake's hand lingered on hers for a moment longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of the connection they both felt. Walking her to her car, a vehicle she had acquired for her Earth operations, Jake stopped and turned to her under the glow of the streetlight. "I feel like there's so much more to you, Zara. Every moment with you is like peeling back a layer of something extraordinary." Zara's heart raced. His words echoed her own thoughts, her own feelings, but she held back, bound by her mission, her responsibilities to her. Back in the confines of her ship, Zara immersed herself in analysis and reports, her interactions with Jake providing rich data. Yet her own emotions rendered the findings bittersweet. She scrutinized every recorded moment, every shared glance and touch, through the lens of her mission. However, the scientific detachment she was trained for eluded her. Jake's words, his hopes, and his fears resonated too deeply, blurring the lines between subject and significant other. The dilemma intensified when her superiors on Xylon contacted her for an update. They were eager for progress, for confirmation that the mission could proceed to the next phase, perhaps even initiating the first steps towards human-Xylonian integration. Zara reported meticulously on the technical aspects, carefully omitting the personal entanglements that might complicate the mission's objectives. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was withholding something crucial, not just from her leaders, but from herself. As days passed, the tension within Zara grew. The dual life she led became increasingly fraught with conflict. On one hand, she was the objective scientist, collecting data for her people's salvation. On the other, she was a friend, a confidant to Jake, and possibly more. The boundaries between professional and personal were not just blurred. They were being erased. Compelled by a need to resolve her internal conflict, Zara sought out Jake again, this time under the pretense of needing his help with a fictional research project about human responses to extraterrestrial concepts. They met at a local library, a place stacked with books and hushed tones, where ideas about the universe weren't out of place. As they discussed various sci-fi theories and actual scientific principles, Jake's enthusiasm was palpable. He pulled out books and articles, showing Zara diagrams and speculative essays with the excitement of a child. In those moments, Zara saw a glimpse of how this mission could evolve, how a partnership, both professional and personal, might actually work. But reality snapped back when Jake, ever perceptive, noticed her distraction. "You seem far away today," he observed, his voice tinged with concern. "Is everything okay?" Zara hesitated, torn. Honesty tempted her, the desire to share everything, to trust Jake with her true identity and purpose. But caution held her back, the weight of her responsibilities anchoring her to her role. Instead, she offered a smile, a mask to cover her turmoil. "Just tired," she said, the lie leaving a bitter taste. "Your enthusiasm is really helping, though." Jake nodded. though his eyes were clouded with unanswered questions. They continued their work, but the air between them had shifted, filled with unspoken words and unasked questions. Later, as Zara walked him to his car, the evening air crisp and clear, Jake stopped and faced her, his expression earnest. "Zara, I feel like there's something more you want to say. Whatever it is, you can tell me. I'm here for you." The offer was genuine, a lifeline thrown across the chasm that divided them. Zara stood frozen, caught between the world she came from and the world she was growing to love. The silence stretched between them, heavy and expectant. Finally, she took a deep breath, her decision made. Not tonight, she thought. Not yet, but soon. "Thank you, Jake," she said, her voice soft. "I might take you up on that sooner than you think." They parted with a promise to meet again, leaving Zara to contemplate her next move. The stakes were high, and her next actions would determine the path of not just her mission, but her heart. As she drove back to her hidden ship, the stars seemed to watch over her, silent guardians in a sky full of secrets. In the solitude of her spacecraft, Zara reviewed the recordings of her recent interactions with Jake, each frame and audio clip a testament to the complexity of human emotion. Her analysis was clinical, yet her observations were increasingly personal. The lines drawn between duty and desire had not just blurred, they had vanished. Zara knew she was approaching a precipice, one that might redefine her mission entirely. Determined to seek clarity, Zara engaged her ship's AI, querying potential outcomes of disclosure. The holographic displays flickered to life, projecting simulations and probabilities. The risks were significant: cultural shock, diplomatic incidents, even hostility. But there were positive outcomes too: mutual understanding, partnership, perhaps even the blending of worlds. The uncertainty was daunting. Yet Zara felt an uncharacteristic optimism, spurred by her experiences with Jake. The decision crystallized one evening as she watched Earth's moon rise, a thin crescent hanging in the twilight. It symbolized a new beginning, and with that cosmic sign, Zara resolved to tell Jake the truth. Their next meeting was at a quiet cafe, away from the usual bustle of their previous encounters. Jake sensed her seriousness immediately, his usual ease tempered by the gravity he saw in her eyes. "I have something important to tell you," Zara began, her voice steady despite the tumult within. "It's about who I am, why I'm here." Jake nodded, his expression encouraging. "I'm listening," he said simply, his presence a stable force in the face of unknown revelations. Taking a deep breath, Zara explained her origins from Xylon, her mission to evaluate human potential for collaboration and genetic diversity. She spoke of her planet's struggles, her people's hopes, and the weight of her responsibilities. The words felt surreal even as they rang with undeniable truth. Jake listened intently, his face a mask of concentration. As she spoke, the myriad emotions playing across his features, surprise, disbelief, wonder, mirrored the chaos of her own feelings when she had first landed on Earth. When she finished, a heavy silence fell over them, filled with the magnitude of her confession. Zara braced herself, ready for any reaction: rejection, fear, perhaps even anger. But Jake's response was none of those. After a long moment, he reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said, his voice filled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "It's a lot to take in, but I'm not scared off, if that's what you're worried about." Relief washed over Zara, mingling with a surge of affection. His acceptance was a gift, one she hadn't fully anticipated. "But what does this mean for us?" Jake asked, voicing the question that loomed over them. "It means we have choices," Zara replied. "We can proceed cautiously, explore what collaboration between our worlds might look like. And personally," she paused, her heart on the brink, "personally it means I would like to explore where this connection between us could go." Jake smiled, his grip tightening reassuringly on her hand. "I'd like that," he said. "Let's take on the universe together, one step at a time." In that small cafe, over cups of coffee now gone cold, they charted a course for the future. It was uncharted territory, fraught with challenges and uncertainties. but they were united in their resolve. As they left the cafe, the world around them remained the same, bustling and oblivious to the extraordinary pact forged within. Driving back to her with the truth between them now laid bare, Zara and Jake embarked on a dual path of personal exploration and interstellar diplomacy. Their days were filled with strategic planning and discreet communications with both Xylonian and Earth authorities. Zara introduced Jake to her planet's technology, allowing him to understand the vast potential of their shared future, while Jake helped navigate the complexities of Earth's political and social landscapes. Their work quickly began to bear fruit. Initial virtual meetings between Xylonian representatives and a select group of Earth scientists and diplomats set the groundwork for formal discussions. These were tense yet hopeful encounters, each side cautiously optimistic about the potential benefits of this unprecedented alliance. Simultaneously, the bond between Zara and Jake deepened. Their relationship, born in the shadow of cosmic secrets, grew into a profound partnership. They shared not only love but a unique responsibility. As their affection blossomed, so did their roles as ambassadors, bridging two very different cultures with empathy and intelligence. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves painted the world in hues of orange and red, Jake and Zara stood together at a newly established liaison office, a discreet, secure location where further plans were to be discussed. The office was modest, a symbol of the nascent cooperation between Earth and Xylon, and it buzzed with the quiet energy of possibility. "I never imagined this," Jake said, looking around at the busy staff, both human and Xylonian, working in harmony. "It's like something out of one of those sci-fi books I used to read as a kid." Zara smiled, her eyes reflecting the office's soft light. "I always hoped for it, but to see it come to life, to see our two worlds learning from each other, it's more than I dared hope." Their conversation was interrupted by a call from one of the top Earth diplomats, requesting their presence in a planning session. The discussions were focused, aimed at outlining the next steps for a formal treaty, addressing the myriad details of trade, technology exchange, and most critically, the establishment of a joint scientific endeavor. As they walked to the meeting room, hand in hand, Zara felt a surge of pride. This was her legacy, a tangible result of her bravery and her bond with Jake. Together they entered the room, greeted by faces both human and alien, all united by a common goal. The meeting was a whirlwind of ideas and proposals, with Zara and Jake often at the center, facilitating dialogue and smoothing over cultural misunderstandings. The hours passed in a flurry of activity, and by the end, a draft treaty had begun to take shape, a document that promised a future of shared knowledge and mutual respect. Exhausted yet exhilarated, Zara and Jake stepped out into the night air. The stars twinkled above, a constant reminder of the vast universe they were now navigating together. "Look at those stars," Jake murmured, his gaze upward. "It's amazing to think that not too long ago, I saw them as distant lights, unreachable and mysterious." "And now?" Zara asked, leaning into him, feeling the warmth of his side. "Now," he said, turning to her with a grin, "they're places I might visit someday with you. They're not so distant anymore." They stood together, their silhouettes bathed in moonlight, looking up at the cosmos. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and unknowns, but they faced it as a team, their destinies intertwined with the stars. As they walked back to their shared home, the liaison office behind them and the universe above, Zara felt a profound sense of completion. Her mission had evolved beyond its original parameters, transformed